Have you ever wondered if there are laws so absurd they seem ripped from a comedy sketch? Prepare to have your mind blown, because not only do they exist, but they were actually enforced. In this deep dive into legal history, we uncover the top 10 weirdest historical laws that were actually enforced. Not myths, not urban legends, but real mandates with real consequences. Each one offers a bizarre yet fascinating glimpse into how different societies have tried to make sense of their world. Get ready to laugh, cringe, and question everything you thought you knew about law and order. At number 10, we have no bear wrestling in Oklahoma, a wild law with claws. Among the most bizarre pieces of legislation still lingering on the books today is Oklahoma's outright ban on bear wrestling. Yes, you read that correctly. In the Sooner State, it is explicitly illegal to engage in physical combat with a bear, and this isn't some metaphorical warning, it's a very real statute. While no precise date marks its inception, the very presence of this law points to a time when bear wrestling wasn't just a rare stunt, it was evidently frequent enough to necessitate legal intervention. This oddball law likely emerged as a response to brutal entertainment spectacles of the past, where people pitted themselves against wild animals for public amusement or gambling purposes. It's easy to laugh now, but these events posed serious safety threats and raised concerns about animal cruelty. Enacted to protect both human lives and animal welfare, the law includes strict penalties, including fine and possible jail time, proving it wasn't just for show. Today, it's seldom enforced, because thankfully, bear wrestling is no longer a popular pastime, but the statute remains intact as a peculiar historical relic. This law illustrates how localized entertainment trends can spiral into full-blown public concerns, ultimately requiring legislative action. Number 9 on our list of the weirdest laws ever enforced is a linguistic landmine from Arkansas, where it is technically against the law to mispronounce the state's name. According to the Arkansas Code, it's legally mandated to pronounce it Arkansas with a silent S at the end. This law is not just a quirky guideline, it's an official statute embedded into the state's legal fabric. Rooted in a desire to preserve cultural heritage, this pronunciation law traces back to Arkansas's French historical influence and was intended to distinguish the state from Kansas, despite the similar spelling. The specificity of this regulation is what makes it so unusual. Few places in the world, let alone the United States, have codified the correct way to pronounce their name into law. Though enforcement is almost non-existent today, the statute still stands, serving as a cultural artifact and subtle assertion of regional pride. While it may seem excessive to criminalize mispronunciation, this law reflects the strong local sentiment tied to history, language, and identity. It's a unique example of how states can use legislation to shape how they're perceived and remembered. Cruising into the number 8 spot is a surprisingly wholesome law from Rockville, Maryland, where it is officially illegal to swear while driving. That's right, if you're navigating the perils of rush hour or stuck behind someone doing 20 in a 50, you'd better keep your language PG. This hyper-specific ordinance was designed with public civility in mind, likely responding to concerns about aggressive driving behavior and verbal outbursts that could escalate into road rage. Although drivers typically feel enclosed in their personal space while inside their vehicles, this law makes it clear that your car is still a public setting when it comes to decorum. The statute suggests a community deeply invested in maintaining moral conduct, even in high-stress environments like traffic jams. While not a widely enforced regulation, the law carries real legal weight. Violations can result in misdemeanor charges and fines. It highlights the lengths to which some towns will go to promote polite behavior and reduce public disturbances, even if that means legislating what people say in the privacy of their own vehicles. This law is not just a humorous footnote. It reflects broader societal efforts to curb incivility and foster a more respectful environment. As outdated as it may seem, its continued existence tells a story about the values and priorities of the time it was passed. Today, it's more of a conversation piece than a courtroom issue, but knowing it exists might make you think twice before shouting your favorite expletive at the steering wheel. Floating in at number 7 is a truly regal oddity from medieval England, the royal decree that all whales and sturgeons found within the kingdom were property of the crown. Enacted in 1322 under the Prerogativa Regis, this law declared that any such massive creatures, whether caught in the sea or washed ashore, belonged to the reigning monarch, unless the location was one of the few privileged areas exempted by royal favor. This ancient statute might sound fishy today, but in its time, whales and sturgeons were highly prized for their meat, oil, and in the case of sturgeons, their luxurious caviar. The law wasn't just about food. It was about wealth, power, and royal entitlement. Imagine being a coastal villager who stumbles upon a dead whale and thinks of a hearty feast, only to be reminded that the blubbery jackpot now legally belongs to the king. The enforcement of this law was formalized through a government official known as the Receiver of Wreck, who had the job of managing these high seas treasures on behalf of the monarch. The law may may seem laughable today, but it underscores just how far-reaching monarchical power once was, extending not just across the land, but into the oceans and onto the beaches. Interestingly, while the law is still technically in effect, its practical enforcement has changed. Whales are no longer claimed by the monarch, but sturgeons still are. That's right, if you catch a sturgeon in the UK, it's still the king's fish. This quirky statute remains a fascinating example of how deeply law, nature, and power were once intertwined, and it continues to echo through the centuries as a bizarre yet historically grounded remnant of royal authority. Drawing back into medieval England, number 6 takes us to a time when Sundays weren't for lounging, they were for longbow practice, and failure to comply could land you in jail. Under the reigns of Kings Edward I through Edward IV, spanning from the 13th to the 15th centuries, every able-bodied Englishman aged 17 to 69 was legally required to own a longbow and train with it regularly. This wasn't just patriotic encouragement, it was mandatory by law. In fact, King Edward I went as far as banning all other Sunday sports to ensure his citizens focused solely on archery, a directive King Edward IV reinforced by outlawing early versions of cricket that competed for attention. The law was an ingenious and strategic solution to one of the medieval kingdom's biggest challenges, maintaining a constant, battle-ready military force. The longbow was a formidable weapon, instrumental in battles like Agincourt, but mastering it required years of consistent practice. The government's solution? Make training a legal obligation. Historical records show that penalties for non-compliance included 6 days in jail, underscoring the gravity of the command. Though the longbow fell out of military relevance by the 17th century, the law remained on the books until 1960, finally repealed under the Betting and Gaming Act. That means for hundreds of years, long after muskets and cannons had taken over, English law still technically required its citizens to be ready to fight with bows and arrows. This bizarre legal relic reminds us how legislation can lag behind technological evolution and how seriously medieval governments took defense readiness. Clucking into number 5 is perhaps one of the tastiest and strangest laws still in existence. In Gainesville, Georgia, it's illegal to eat fried chicken with a fork. Yes, you heard that right. This southern city legally requires you to get hands-on with your poultry. Passed in 1961, this law wasn't born from a public health crisis or moral panic, but rather a stroke of brilliant marketing genius. Gainesville, dubbed the poultry capital of the world, wanted to stand out, so city officials cooked up this ordinance to reinforce local pride and attract media attention. It worked. The idea of a law mandating finger-licking good etiquette caught the eye of journalists and tourists alike, turning what could have been a forgettable city into a quirky, must-visit spot for food lovers and fun seekers. Though technically still enforceable, the law is treated more as a ceremonial oddity than a real statute. Its most famous enforcement came in 2009, when a 91-year-old Louisiana tourist named Ginny Dietrich was arrested during her birthday dinner for the crime of using a fork with her chicken. The arrest, made by the police chief and followed by a mayoral pardon, was all part of a light-hearted celebration of the city's unique law and identity. While it won't land you in jail for real, the ordinance symbolizes how legal systems can be used to foster local character, culture, and humor. It's a law that blends civic pride with Southern hospitality and a healthy dose of satire. Springing into 4th place is one of the most hilariously specific food laws ever created: Connecticut's 1948 regulation requiring pickles to bounce. According to this unusual mandate, any pickle sold within state lines must be able to bounce at least 1 foot when dropped, or it cannot be legally offered for sale. While this might sound like something out of a vaudeville comedy routine, the law had a surprisingly serious purpose at the time of its enactment. It was introduced to combat food fraud and ensure proper preservation standards in the post-war era, targeting unscrupulous vendors who were pushing spoiled or improperly processed pickles on unsuspecting customers. The bounce test served as an early and admittedly quirky form of quality assurance. If the pickle was too soft to bounce, it was deemed unfit for consumption. Enforcement was no joke either. 2 men were arrested in 1948 for trying to peddle limp, non-bouncy pickles. Although the charges were eventually dropped due to a technicality, the defendants were salesmen, not packagers. The arrests underscored the law's genuine intent and practical application. Today, the law remains on the books but is largely unenforced, a humorous relic from a time before modern food testing standards. In fact, the rule is so iconic that it inspired a minor league baseball team to temporarily rename itself the Bouncing Pickles. This strange statute stands as a crunchy testament to the odd but earnest efforts of past lawmakers to protect public health. So next time you pop open a jar of pickles in Connecticut, maybe give one a drop test, just to be safe. Marching boldly into third place is a fashion law that reads more like a bizarre dress code from a Renaissance fair than actual legislation. England's 1463 statute banning short tunics and excessively pointy shoes. Instituted during a time when clothing was as much a status symbol as a practical necessity, this law was part of a broader framework of sumptuary laws designed to preserve the rigid social hierarchy of medieval England. It decreed that no man below the rank of a lord could wear a gown or coat that didn't properly cover his genitals and buttocks, an explicit backlash against the popular fashion of short tunics, which had become so abbreviated that codpieces were the only thing standing between modesty and scandal. If that wasn't enough, the law also cracked down on outlandish footwear, prohibiting the wearing of cracos, elongated, pointy shoes that could exceed 2 inches in length. The reason? Not just poor taste, but an attempt to control social climbing through fashion. Clothing at the time was a powerful visual cue of one's class, and allowing the lower orders to mimic aristocratic styles was seen as destabilizing. Violations came with hefty fines, up to 20 shillings for an indecent tunic, equivalent to hundreds of pounds today, and several shillings more for overly flamboyant shoes. These weren't idle threats. Historical records confirmed fines were enforced, and offenders publicly penalized. Though the law was repealed in 1604, as England's class lines blurred with rising merchant wealth, it remains a hilariously rigid reminder of a time when the government literally dressed its people. Rolling in at number 2 is a law that baked its way into both legal history and modern language, the Assize of Bread and Ale. Enacted in 1266 England, one of the earliest and most rigorously enforced consumer protection laws in medieval Europe. This law wasn't just about flour and yeast, it was about maintaining social order in a time when bread and ale were dietary staples. Under this statute, bakers couldn't charge whatever they wanted for their goods. Instead, the price of a loaf was fixed by law, and its weight would fluctuate according to the price of wheat. This meant that during times of scarcity, the loaf got smaller, but never more expensive. The aim was simple yet crucial: prevent bakers from exploiting poor harvests to price gouge desperate citizens. A similar mechanism applied to ale, which was pegged to the costs of wheat, oats, and barley. As odd as it seems today, this method was an ingenious solution to the lack of modern economic regulation, and it had real teeth. Those who cheated customers faced public humiliation or worse. In 1360, a man literally named John Baker was fined a hefty sum 24 pence, equivalent to around 70 pounds today, and placed in the pillory for selling short-weight bread. This strict enforcement shows how seriously the government took its role in managing daily economic life. Interestingly, the fear of punishment led bakers to add an extra loaf when selling a dozen, giving rise to the phrase baker's dozen that lives on today. The law itself lasted until 1863, long outlasting the medieval era that birthed it. Its eventual repeal marked a shift toward modern economic liberalism, but its legacy lives on in every extra donut or roll tossed into a bag. Topping our list of the weirdest historical laws that were actually enforced is a delightfully bizarre yet oddly sensible regulation from Victorian England. Under the Licensing Act of 1872, it is illegal to be drunk in charge of a cow. That's right, if you're intoxicated while guiding your bovine buddy down a public road, you're breaking the law. This oddly specific clause also included being drunk in charge of carriages, horses, and even steam engines, reflecting the diverse and chaotic traffic of 19th century Britain. It might sound hilarious today, but the law was a serious attempt to protect public safety at a time when roads were shared by people, animals, machines, and alcohol-fueled misjudgments. The idea of a tipsy farmer staggering behind Bessie the cow wasn't just comic relief, it was a genuine hazard. With no formalized traffic system in place, ensuring the sobriety of those managing any form of transport was essential. This early form of drink driving law imposed fines up to 40 shillings or imprisonment with or without hard labor for a month, showing that authorities weren't kidding around. As cars took over the roads, the law evolved, leading to the more familiar drink driving offenses of the 20th century. But the original clause about cattle remains technically active. This lingering piece of legal history offers a hilarious glimpse into a time when steam engines and cows shared the same legal footing, quite literally. It's a vivid example of legal inertia, where obsolete laws remain buried in the books, offering delightful moments of discovery centuries later. So if you're enjoying a pint in the UK and your cow's waiting outside, maybe call a sober shepherd instead. From protecting pickles to banning bear wrestling, these strange yet real laws reveal just how creatively societies have tried to solve their problems, and how legal systems evolve alongside culture, technology, and tradition. What may seem laughable now once served serious purposes, from enforcing public safety to preserving social order. These laws aren't just odd, they're powerful reminders of how the past shapes the present. If you enjoyed this deep dive into legal weirdness, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more fascinating content. Thanks for watching.